Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ordinary Magic. If you have not joined live today, then you'll be receiving the recording and be listening to Ordinary Magic through the recording. So I hope you enjoyed today's session, and I'm going to be sharing with you some tips and tricks to do with Ordinary Magic. I first want us just to start out, each of you, I'd like you to touch something in your immediate surrounding, anything. Okay, so what did you use to touch? Okay, so mostly, I've got a lemon in my hand here. Mostly we use our hands to touch. Okay. Now I'd like you to take your hands and put them behind your back. Okay. And I'd like you, as quick as you can, to touch something in your immediate surrounding. Okay. Okay, so what did you use? You couldn't use your hands because your hands were behind your back. So likely you would have used your elbow or your chin. And I'm sorry, we don't have cameras on, so we could actually see all the crazy positions that you get into when you use actually all parts of your body have sensory nerve endings that can actually touch. But we get into a habit of always using our hands when we need to touch something. And when your hands get put behind your back, they get cut off. You can't use them anymore. And what you just did right now was actually practice resilience. Because resilience is when the way you usually do something, you can't do it like that anymore. Okay. Then you need to find another way as quickly as you possibly can. Okay. And that means that the speed of your response counts and the quality of your response counts. So when we face adversity, when our hands have been cut off behind us, that speed and that strength of our response, that's exactly what resilience actually is. And there are two important things to remember in this, is that to be able to be resilient, we need, first of all, to have faced an adversity, and we need to have overcome an adversity. So hands behind the back, hands cut off, okay? And we can respond, and we can respond positively and successfully. Okay, so that's what resilience really is. And today, I'd use this webinar title, Ordinary Magic. So where did I get Ordinary Magic from? So Ordinary Magic actually comes from this lady. Her name is Anne Marstons. And I absolutely love and admire the work that she does. So she's been studying, she began back, the science of resilience has been around for probably about 50 years, where resilience scientists have been researching what makes some people recover from adversity and others get very stuck in that adversity or never really fully recover or don't recover positively. And this research began with children in World War II. And a lot of research was done on children who had lost both their parents, they'd been relocated, they'd experienced incredible trauma. And all through this, trying to figure out why some succeed and others fail in this situation. So her work in this space, she describes resilience as a capacity of a system, and that system being a person or a family or an economy, a country, the globe. So whatever system currently you feeling is being challenged, okay, is how do you adapt successfully to the challenges when your system is threatened? And she just refers to it as ordinary magic. She says we all have it, okay, but we have to hone it, we have to work with it. There's a skill set. So there's a set of competencies that when we learn those things, we can truly face adversity and not only just face it, but come out of it. Sometimes we'll definitely surviving, but more so thriving. Okay. So that's why it's called ordinary magic. Each of you listening today actually has that ordinary magic. You've just got to be able to learn how to tap into it, what it looks like, and how you can reinforce the habits that actually make you strong in that space. So as I said, lots of people have been studying it, and there are some pioneers in the field. I'm going to talk a little bit today about research, and particularly in South Africa. But before I do, I'm going to ask you to do something else interesting that's really going to tell you how you can hone your skills. I want you to imagine that you're holding a lemon. So I've got a lemon in my hand, and I give you a knife, and you cut this lemon. And I'd like you, as you're cutting through the lemon, to see if you can start to smell the lemon. Okay, cut it into wedges. Okay, as I've got on on my screen. Cut it into wedges, and then I'd like you just to take one of the wedges between your thumb and your forefinger and hold that wedge and squeeze it just a little bit. And then take the lemon up to your nose and smell that lemon. Okay? Now, as you smell that, I'd like you then to consider taking a bite of that lemon. Okay? And as you do that, you should start to feel the saliva starting to be secreted. Okay? And this, what you've just done now, is showing us the power of our brains. And because of this incredible power that we have, our brains can be such an asset in terms of resilience, but they can also be such a challenge in terms of resilience, because we can learn from experiences and we want to be able to hardwire them into a circuit for ourselves. But the brain operates so quickly. It's got neurons that are firing 5 to 50 times a second. And all the while, we can actually take this and say, what can we do with it when it comes to growing resilience? Okay. We can actually take moment by moment, every day, we can be doing things that actually improve our resilience, minute by minute. It's about resilience is not something that you have or don't have. It's something that you actually do. And when you take bite-sized little bits and you keep doing them again and again and again, you actually end up hardwiring some very successful habits for yourself. And this is what I've really based my resilience program, essentials program on, is being able to take short, smart moves and be able to hardwire them into everyday behaviors. So if you joined here today, you would probably have done the resilience quiz, which is a resilience profile. And I'm going to chat to you a little bit about that in the next while. But why did you even take it? And why is resilience so very important to you? Right? Today has a very demanding landscape. If you're in the corporate space, very demanding. If you're in a school space, equally demanding. No matter where you are, if you're showing up for work, okay, it's more than just weathering challenges that we need. We actually need to use resiliency to thrive in those spaces. So we know we need it, okay, but we don't always know where to get it. Okay, we just assume people have it. And in South Africa, there's a lot of that, saying South Africans are very resilient. We just assume that we're going to actually have it. And that's where I found myself 10 years ago, where I started this journey of discovering what resilience was, finding out the research and finding out all the tips and tricks that I could actually master and raise my capacity for resilience so that I could face the adversity I faced. So it's like if we were going on a dangerous hike, we would actually be able to say, what do we need to put in our backpack? What is some essential food? What are some supplies that we need? And it's exactly the same as the road we travel in life, is that we need some psychological supplies. We need some stuff to put in our backpack, some courage, some generosity, and I call it a neural backpack. We need something to put in that backpack. And what you fill up in that backpack is what you use when challenges come your way. So growing these and improving your resiliency will result in less anxiety. Okay, it won't take away the stresses that you face, but it'll allow you to face those with less anxiety, with less irritation, often with less disappointment and frustration, okay? Less loneliness, okay, and hurt and resentment, which are all quite dangerous emotions to be experiencing. So when these waves of life come at you, you want to have something in your backpack that helps you to center yourself, to be peaceful, and to really, yes, to speak to your core. So what are we going to do today, and what can you expect from today's session? So 3 things. I'm going to uncover 3 common thinking traps that hinder resilience in the workplace. And I'm then going to give you some actionable strategies to overcome these traps. And then finally, I'm going to unpack what is behind your resilience assessment score, because I think that's really important for you to see. It's not just about getting one badge. It's actually a benchmark that gives you a lot more detail, which I've actually emailed through to all of the participants today. So when it comes to hindering resilience in the workplace is an interesting thing, and we often make a lot of assumptions about resilience in the workplace. And I found some research. It's actually the ADP Research Institute in America. They do a lot of really great research, and they challenge some assumptions. And they were really open and curious as to, is this, are they accurate in these assumptions, or really are they just that, assumptions? And one thing that they discovered in their research was that loving work matters. So that's really an interesting one that speaks to. So as I go through them, if you've got any thoughts, you're welcome to put them in the chat. Any thoughts on this idea of loving work matters? Okay, so loving what you do, regardless of your ability, is key to resilience. So we're talking specifically here about workplace resilience. So I'm going to give you 5 things that they uncovered. Another is that the type of work has an impact on resilience. And this, I think, is very, very useful insight, even though in the South African context, this is the USA research, it's really valuable because if the levels of work, as you go higher up in an organization, and in this case, they're talking about knowledge workers having higher resiliency compared to people doing repetitive tasks. There's something also said to be, as you're moving through an organization, you are forced to make more decisions. You're forced to learn a skill set that enables you. Okay? Another assumption that is often made is that men are more resilient than women, and based on a whole lot of gender stereotypes. But actually, their findings were that gender does not predict workplace resilience. There's another whole set of competencies that actually is really critical in this space. So although here it's a 17% and 21%, men come up slightly higher, but it's actually not a differentiating factor. The fourth one is that age doesn't either. So yes, as we get older, we get wiser. But in their study, the Gen Z, which is those born between 1997 and 2012, they were 14% of that group were highly resilient compared to the 13% of the baby boomers, which are the old ones from 1946 to 1964. Okay. So no matter whether you are young or old, within the workplace, you have an equal opportunity to be highly resilient. And I think that's really useful for us. And again, a lot of stereotypical stuff saying that the Gen Z are not as resilient, yet their research is actually saying that's not the assumption that they can make. And then the final one is resilience varies by job level. Okay, and this point I made earlier, again in number 2, where I said the type of work you do, and again, this is the job level, that upper management are in this particular study of research said that upper management are highly resilient. It's 37% compared to more the intern temporary employment as only 10% are highly resilient. So quite interesting. I'm hoping if you've got any comments on that, you can put them in the chat. So definitely in times of difficulty, this really shares with us that activating resilience allows you to come out on top, which means the more you do it, the better you get. Okay. So what about our South African context? Because that is research from the United States, and our own context in South Africa is an interesting one. And finding the research, I think not enough research has actually been done in South Africa. I found the University of Pretoria has an institute, a resilience center. They're doing some fantastic stuff. And a lot of work is done in those who have degrees in social work. So doing their doctorates, their papers on resilience in that space. And so not necessarily workplace resilience, but resilience in general of the South African people. And I'd love it if you could follow me on LinkedIn, because I've just started a conversation on LinkedIn, which I'm going to be following over the coming weeks, because I've been doing a lot of research and reading very interesting takes on is it okay to relentlessly be exposed to things that require you to be resilient? So generally, global north, resilience, all the resilience research tends to be around people who've experienced trauma, but it's often very much a one-off event. Okay, and that's something that got me in this space to start to explore and to learn, because I had that one event, which was, yes, a life-changing event, but my life was not constantly all through from childhood facing adversity, socioeconomic challenges, gender-based violence, all sorts of things that many of the South African population face on a daily basis. And when we looked at those two things, you've got to have an adversity, and then there's also overcoming it positively. In other words, getting an outcome that's positive. And the challenge, and I've put up there the gentleman, Adrian van Breda from the University of Johannesburg. He's done a really interesting research on, is resilience cultural? And he comes to this thing that actually when a group of people is continually facing adversity, there is no outcome, there's no end game. And what does that actually look like compared to a lot of the global north research that we actually tap into? So I just say, watch the space, because I think there's a lot of research that we can still do. And certainly I've started a journey of opening up some conversations that help us, instead of just making an assumption, which often in a workplace, it's the assumption that, oh, but South Africans are so resilient, so it must just happen. And it's not something that you're just born with. It's something you have to do. And in order to do it, you need some skill set and a set of competencies that you can use in your context. So we don't want to just assume, don't worry, upskilling people. Every organization should have a focus on, do our people have what it takes to actually be resilient in the face of the challenges that are facing them at work? Why does resilience matter so? There's just so much out there in terms of stats on 1 in 3 adults experience extreme stress. Okay? So the likelihood of you being one of those 3 adults is very great. Okay? 1 in 8 adults experiences anxiety. Okay? And 1 in 6 adults experiences depression. Okay? And all hugely connected to people needing to be able to push through some really difficult and challenging times. A strong resilience core helps you to reduce the effects of stress, anxiety, and depression. It does not take away those things, but it certainly helps you in dealing and coping with them. So resilient people are prepared. They have that backpack I spoke about, that neural backpack, and they know what to take out of the backpack when, to be able to use it in situations. And I think every organization now should be in a space where this becomes a priority. Do our people know what to take out of the backpack, how to use it for themselves and for their colleagues, okay, to be able to support for that? So resilient people don't give up on their dreams. They push for their goals. It's a very strong link with resilience to perseverance or grit. And although resilience is more than just grit and perseverance, it's certainly a huge contributing factor. And more research also done in the States on a very large group of adults was that those with high resilience scores, 96% on a measure of perseverance, they scored 96% on perseverance. And those with low resilience scores only scored 49% on perseverance. So there's a very strong connection between the two. So those who strive to improve, not to give up, to stay engaged, are able to meet the organizational goals that are required. So what are the three thinking traps? And I call them three thinking traps because I feel when we talk about thinking traps, it's happening inside of us. Okay. And thinking traps they catch us. And mostly if we're unaware of them, then they can do a whole lot of unraveling. And they certainly are, in this case, a huge barrier to resiliency. So the three thinking traps come from the work of Martin Seligman. And Martin Seligman has written a number of books, and you may even have read some of these. He is a psychologist, he's an educator, and he's an author, and an author of self-help books. Okay. And he's a very strong promoter within the scientific community of the theories of well-being and of positive psychology. And he did a lot of work on the theory of learned helplessness. And back in the 1970s, there wasn't maybe as much guiding psychological experiments as there is today, ethically. And some of the research that he did and the experiments that they did were actually really can make you feel really uncomfortable. One set of experiments done in the 1970s used dogs, and they had an electric floor in a container. And they did this research around what it would take before the dog gave up. And there was the research was done on dogs, it was done on rats, and obviously not in the same way to people. But as the research evolved from the 1970s to today, there's been a lot of work and experiments covering this idea of learned helplessness. And then Martin Seligman realized that actually there was so much more to his contributions to the world than just that aspect. And that was when he moved into this idea of positive psychology. And the work he's done since then has really had a profound effect on the understanding of resilience. And he was super curious as to why some people stay stuck in their troubles and why some people don't. Okay. And what are the differentiating factors for that? So in my own journey, I found this to be really insightful information. And what are those thinking traps? Because if you are facing an adversity, you don't want to stay stuck in it. Okay? You want to be able to move. And he has some really great tips and tricks for that. So what are the three thinking traps? So they are beliefs. They happen inside our head. And Martin Seligman calls them the three Ps, okay? And they're called the three P barriers, okay? And when you first face an adversity, it is natural to be experiencing these three Ps. But the longer you stay stuck in these three beliefs, the longer it will ever take you to recover, like when you use some part of your body to respond, is that the longer it will take you to recover from that adversity. So the first P is the word permanence. Okay? It comes from the word permanent. And this is a belief that the aftershock of the event will last forever. Okay? And this shows up in the language that you speak. And in terms of the workplace, you can hear it in the language of those around you, where permanence is the belief that this will last forever. Pervasiveness, which is the belief that the event will affect all areas of your life, coming from the word permeate. Okay, it seeps in everywhere. So an isolated event, the belief that it's going to affect everything. Okay, and everything is awful. And the third is personalization, or I'd like to use the word powerlessness for that. It's also a P. The belief that either we are at fault and stay stuck in that, or that we have no control, which is the powerlessness. Okay. So when people have these three, the research on those recovering from trauma were those who recover from the trauma don't stay stuck with these three beliefs. Okay. And they move across to the three that I've got on the screen now: temporary, isolated, and with effort, E for effort. So moving from three Ps to time. And that means in the language will be, instead of this will never get better, it's everything's affected, this is awful, and I'm powerless, I have no control. Okay. Instead of that language, it's starting to move across what we call three bridges to temporary, isolated, and with effort, I can influence. So temporary, it will change. Okay. And maybe it's going to take time. Maybe it's going to take some skills from me. So it's all connected together. Support from others. It's isolated. It affects only a certain area. It's specific. It's not permeated into everything. And with effort, I actually have what it takes to make some change. I can do something here. Okay. And you can start to see the locus of control here shifting from a victim. It's permanent. It'll affect everything. Everything's awful. It's never going to get better. To I'm powerless. To moving to it will change. Things will improve. I do have some area of influence here. I can begin to take some steps. Okay. So if you think about that in terms of the language you're listening to in your workplace. Okay. You're welcome to put anything in the chat if you've got some thoughts on this. But this language that you are listening to is around you. If you look at, I've marked with little crosses. Sometimes when an adversity or change hits, initially you may put a cross on it and say, I'm pretty much here in terms of where I am on the continuum of moving from it will never get better towards temporary, it will change eventually. And when you actually snapshot for yourself, where are you in with these three beliefs? So I'm putting them on a continuum for you to say you're going to move across from the three P's to the tie. Where are you on this continuum? Okay. When you can actually mark and you can take a snapshot, you start to become more self-aware of what is your language doing to you in this space. And what areas, so for example, personalization, powerless, no control. So what do you need to do? And what will it take for you to move across these three bridges? So when you think of this in terms of a workplace, you've got to say, how does this enhance decision-making and your strategic effectiveness in whatever role you're in? Okay. If you're using the language of the three Ps, Martin Seligman's saying, it's not going to happen, okay? Until you start to shift and use the language of temporary, isolated, with effort, I can make a difference. You're not going to make that shift. So often in a workplace, we'll have a lot of what we call catastrophizing. Okay, so think of the people around you and what you're listening to. And sometimes these words might resonate with you. A lot of exaggerating, a lot of awfulizing, a lot of generalizing. So they're all "izing" at the end words, catastrophizing, exaggerating, awfulizing, generalizing. And these are real barriers. So these are your red flags. If you're in conversations and you're immersing yourself in this, it's not going to help your resiliency. So this catastrophizing is a constant worry that we start convincing ourselves that the absolute worst scenario is going to happen. Okay? And it takes perspective. When you hear that, it's the red flag to say, just stop, pause, okay, step out. Okay? Exaggerating is making something very big. Okay? And if you're listening to those around you, it doesn't help you when you've got people around you that are either exaggerating, awfulizing, or generalizing. Okay, you can see the generalizing allows you, when you start to make generalizations, it doesn't allow you to do the tie with effort. Isolated and temporary is the isolated thing. Generalizing is counter to that. So the more you indulge in catastrophizing, exaggerating, awfulizing, and generalizing, the less resilient you're going to be, individually and as a team of people in the workplace. So that's those three thinking traps, as I mentioned, three thinking traps. And really just what to be aware of is to know what the red flags are and to stop, pause. How do I step out of this? So if you have joined this today, then I do hope you've taken an opportunity to do your resilience profile. And that's really where your journey starts, because it's taking a snapshot of where you are currently. Okay. And there are 4 different levels on this journey. Okay. And I'm going to just show you what I emailed to those of you who've participated, was not just where you fit in terms of these badges, in terms of how resilient you are, but how your score. I want to just go into the background of how your score is calculated, because I think this really does start to give you some power to say, what do I need to do next? So those, the resilience quiz is based on 12 categories. Okay? And these are the 12 categories. I've got them as little cards, and I've actually got the physical cards as well for each of these, and I call them smart moves. Okay. And when you did the resilience quiz, you actually answered questions on each of these 12 categories, and you answered 3 questions for each of the categories. Okay. And what is actually behind that then? So when you look at what I emailed to each of you, you got the category and you got a score for that category. And it's worked on a Likert scale of 1:5. Okay. Each category you can score 15 points in that category. And that means each one of the 3 questions was 5 points. Okay. On a scale of, is this sort of true of you or not true of you at all? And if you have a look at this one here that I've snapshotted, you'll see ranging from 7 for this one over here, up to 13 for the third one. You can see that when you get an average badge, there's sort of like a, how do you find a way forward when you know, okay, that's where I'm at, but you haven't got the deeper detail for it. So normally I do one-on-one coaching sessions for this, where we take your resilience quiz, and we look at, so which of these smart moves are the ones that are well practiced, you often using those competencies, it's easy for you, and which of the competencies do you struggle with, and that means you're not bringing them to your challenge that you have. So in terms of this, if you look at this one, Paint a Rock, it's about exercising gratitude. It's got a 7 there. So if you look at the 3 questions, this one here, if you're answering a 3 for each, 3, 6, 9, then you're scoring 9. It's still an average. It's not something that, and on any good day, you can fill this in and think average is okay. But when you face a huge adversity, average doesn't really get you what you need. Okay. These things need to be brought to the surface and hardwired, so that when you really need to dig in and use them, you know what they are and you can actually action them. Okay? So each of these, so I've got 11 on the screen, but there are 12 in total. Each of the 12, you'll see on the next slide, I'm showing you each number 1, 2, and 3. And in red, you can see the competencies and the skill set required behind each of them. So if you scored pretty low in the first one, then it was a gauge of your optimism, your self-efficacy, your confidence, your perspective taking, your reframing. Okay. So I've grouped each of these in terms of how I've developed the quiz. Is around doing my own research on resiliency and what are the essentials, what are the components of that. And a lot of it has to do with autonomy and control. A lot of it, so that's linked a lot to self-efficacy and a belief that you can do it. And I always say, resilience it's more about what you believe, even than what's the skill set you have, in terms of the more you believe you have what it takes, you're bringing so much more to the table when you're facing your challenges. So emotional regulation, a lot of stuff is underpinned by EQ, so emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is on the decline globally. Okay, we're facing a lot in the world. We wouldn't have the level of conflict we're experiencing at a global level and in a workplace if we were to raise the EQ. So resiliency, yes, underpinning things like emotional self-regulation, the ability to bring humor to a situation, to dig in and have a sense of humor and be able to bring that when needed. Concepts like mindfulness, all underpin resilience. So the Resilience Essentials is a program that directly links to the 12 essentials that that quiz measured you on. Okay, so the first 6 across the top here are part of a program called Resilience Essentials, and the 6 across the bottom are the Resilience Power Pack. Once you've got the essentials right and you've hardwired those habits, then you move into that space. So Resilience Essentials is a course. I've partnered with MSC on this course. And really, if I were to sum up in a sentence, what is the power of it? Why have I developed this? It's just about helping ordinary people, which is all of us, facing extraordinary difficulties and being able to overcome more than you ever imagined possible and actually be stronger for it. So I've taken a lot of my own life experiences and stories. In my own life, I had sort of like the carpet pulled out from underneath me and life just completely turned upside down. And my go-to was, I'm like a scientist, my go-to was research, find out how on earth do I do this? What do I need and what would it take? So from that journey in the past 10 years, I've validated it always with research, finding out more about how people are measuring the different things, and then bringing it to a place of action. Okay. And that comes back to what I spoke about with the lemon. Okay. Are there things that you can just hardwire, keep doing again and again and again, and they actually change your neural pathways? Okay. And I call it hardwiring. So there's some downloadable during the course of that course. They're downloadables, and I call them cheat sheets. So they're little cards like this, and you can actually download them, and then you can put them somewhere and use them. So I really encourage people through the process to make things visible for themselves and actually check on daily, how do I use this? How do I bring it to the moment each time? And perhaps you may have scored quite high on your resilience quiz. Then I would challenge you to say it's actually perhaps in that you already at the summit and a summit conqueror. But then your role is, how do you make this teachable and actionable for the people around you? And I think that's where I found this in my journey. It was mastering for myself, but then using this to actually support and help others and empower them with these skills. So we have that practical side, and there's also a manual that's downloadable that gives you that, and even a 21-day resilience challenge, okay, which really brings in how do you hardwire this once you've left the course, the program, okay. So I really would love it if you've done the quiz, then this page would be familiar to you, because it's where you click for the resilience quiz, but you can go to the bottom of the business solutions section, click on the online resilience course, and you will get a page that gives you all the information and details you need about it. And you'll see on there's a little sign up to the skills shop, and that's where it's ready, set, go. As I've said, resilience is not something you have or don't have, it's something you actually do. So if you want to raise your skills, then that will take you to the MSC skills shop, where you can actually click and go and do the program. So it's an online program, and once you've emailed me, you can get support from me through that program. So I think the question here is not what is your resilience, as in what I asked you at the beginning about your score, but more about how resilient can you be, okay? So perhaps you're sitting now at a peak performer, okay? You can still raise your game in terms of getting to Summit Conqueror. So please, I encourage you to email me. I did send each of you as participants that breakdown of your score. You're welcome to contact me and see if there's anything else you'd like to find out about it. And if you would like to also in the chat put anything. I think I'm going to stop the recording now, and then I can actually just unmute you and ask if there's anyone who would like to ask any questions. There is an opportunity and a time now for being able to do that.